Welcome back to Lit versus Genre, everyone. I am Steve.
I'm Jeff.
And we are switching up the format. I feel like yet again, we're switching up the format, Jeff. But we are now in an effort, in a race against time, to beat the television show. We're going to do 2 chapters of video from here on out. We got to get this moving, Jeff. We got to get this going.
Well, every good story needs a time crunch, right? So
There you
we're
go.
just adding a ticking clock to to our YouTube. But yeah, no, we're real excited to obviously do this for the show, and it just feels right to get this done first. And I think we can still, talk in this with the same quality, if you will, about 2 chapters in one recording. So let's get in. Shelter from the Storm.
The same way too much depth to every last detail we're gonna bring to this. So
Yeah,
yeah, Shelter from the Storm. We'll talk about a ticking clock.
too much stuff. Yep, go ahead.
Here's the opposite of a ticking clock. I guess they have to leave the people, but this chapter, Jeff, I mainly wanted to talk about, I think,
Yeah, no, sure.
length
Mhm.
and why fantasy novels have to be this long. Like, what? How did this happen? Why is
Why
this
is
a
it the norm?
thing? Because when I read chapters like this, and frankly, the last Traveling People chapter, I'm like, he's doing this because there's this expectation of length. Like, am I wrong? Because
Yeah.
I would just cut. I mean, again, maybe this is going to be super important later that we met these people and then immediately left them. But,
Mhm.
like, it feels like treading water.
It is a fascinating aspect of fantasy novels because, we've talked before about the brick and how fantasy readers, the epic fantasy readers, they want the brick, right? I want the brick. I've
Hmm.
said it before, I used to like spurn novels that were less than like 400 words, like 400 pages or something. Like that's not a novel. But where does that come from? Considering that Lord of the Rings, which is the precursor of so much of this, is not that crazy long, right?
Right.
Like you look at Lord of the Rings, that thing is like one of these, right?
Yeah.
So where does it come from? I don't know, but I know that the people want it, right? Not everybody, obviously. Not everyone is an epic fantasy reader. People want that immersion. Like these are some of my favorite chapters, honestly, the 2 Act 1
Yeah.
chapters. Just because I'm like living in it, hearing about different societies, how they live. It makes the world feel more real. It like gives breath to this world to me. That there's other people outside of this immediate conflict, but do have to run from it, and what their lives are like. And again, just this expanded world of getting to see these various peoples. This is what I live for. But I do hear you that without clear plot progression, obviously you're going to lose people for sure. And this is why people, I think, don't read epic fantasy because they're like, where's the plot? Or why YA gets so much attention or why
Mm.
YA blows up, right? Because usually YA, this doesn't happen, right? Like it's gonna clip along. There's something that is happening next and
Right.
then next and then
Yeah.
next to grab you because you need that to keep a teenager's attention, right? For instance. And yet so many adults read
Or a
YA. Why,
43-year-old
right?
man's attention. I mean,
No,
for
exactly, but that's my point. But then
the.
so many adults are reading YA. Why? Right? Because it's giving you that, I think, in large part.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's my non-answer to your question.
Well, do you think, and again, kind of knowing more of the history, was Jordan the first to kind of like just roll out every single book in my series is going to be 700 plus pages, or were people doing this already?
You know what? I know I started reading a book about fantasy actually, and it was starting to talk about some of the history of fantasy. I need to finish reading that book. But my understanding is that there were some well more detailed works, like I'm thinking Conan the Barbarian, that happened before that, Robert Jordan picked up and
Hmm.
started writing. But I don't know. I can't
Are
say for
those
definitive
super
fact. That's something I'm
long?
definitely
The
that
Conan
that's what I'm
books?
that's what I don't know.
Gotcha.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
how long were they? And what makes me wonder is like, were Robert Jordan's Conan books longer than the average bear? You know what I mean? Did he start this trend? I don't know.
I
Because
feel like you
obviously,
couldn't. I feel like like something like that that's more
because it's
pulpy,
pulpy.
right? Like
Exactly.
it's got to go
Right.
boom, boom,
Mhm.
boom, boom, boom.
Precisely. So I don't know. Like I will do some research before our next one, because like I said, I just sort of started that book. But I'm also just going to do some more basic research because I'm curious. Like, was this the beginning of longer books? Because it wasn't just this. Like Shannara is pretty long, sort of Shannara, which is like a complete Tolkien retelling in its first book. I'm trying to think of some others, but yeah, I don't know because obviously it's not popular with publishers. Publishers don't want to publish big books. It's
Mm-hmm.
more expensive,
Mm-hmm.
So no, I'll do some research, but I think we can agree that this one certainly is, and I think it's done for immersion more of an expectation of length because I don't know if that existed yet, but I could
Right.
be wrong, and I'll do more research to find out.
Okay, cool. Report back. Report back.
I'll do what I can. I'll do what I
Because
can.
I don't think I have much to say about this chapter. Maybe this is another good
Yeah,
reason
sure.
why we're doing two this week. And
Right.
I don't have much to say about it. There is like just some more. I do appreciate Perrin. I feel like some of the boys now are coming more around to my way of thinking, where they're like, something tells me to wait, and he's pissed. Perrin's like,
Right. He's
something.
freaking out.
What's the something, dude? You know, and it's
Right.
like, yeah, yeah. But Perrin, people have been doing this the whole book. I don't know if you've noticed, but people have been doing that the whole book. But I'm glad now that people are starting to speak up about it and get a little
I
angry.
assume you're talking about the equation of like the pattern, right? Like it's the pattern to do this, like it's
Yeah,
something sort of thing.
just
Yeah.
vague, like not giving all the information, you know,
Mhm.
being vague, saying we need to do X, Y, and Z without explanation. Like, and
Right.
here now Elias is doing it. We need to stay in in this traveling peoples thing for a little bit longer. Why? Doesn't say. And again, if it's because, you know, the Trollocs and the Halfmen are outside nearby and they're still trying to lay low. The whole reason Perrin's asking about this is because he's worried kind of about the exact thing you expect to happen, which is they're going to get invaded and get all these hippie
Yeah,
pacifists killed by
exactly.
hanging out here. So it doesn't seem like that could be the something. I mean, maybe it is, but then like, why wouldn't you just say, "Hey, we need to lay low because I think they're out there." Or maybe it's just
Mm.
again Elias just has weird feelings. But
Yeah, I
Perrin
think
even straight up doesn't interpret it that way. He interprets it as if you know something you aren't telling the rest of us.
right.
I don't know. I just appreciate it. I
No,
want more people
what
screaming.
real question? More
Tell
people
me.
screaming.
Just tell me.
Yeah, I think for this one, I was thinking about that when I was doing that. I was like, oh, something not answered. But I do think for Elias, the idea is that he is this sort of, wolf brother. And so he has like the animal instincts of, listen to that feeling, right? Which
Mhm.
is what he does try to explain basically afterward. But I hear that if we've already sort of seen that in other aspects of the book with the pattern, that could be a frustrating theme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another theme that I feel like is repeating now is
Ooh,
boys getting flustered when girls in a series come up and dance with them because it
in
felt
a
like
series.
yeah, because it felt like the same thing with Rand in that one chapter, and like progressively each new girl who came up to dance with them was
Oh,
like
right,
more
because it was like
embarrassing.
ingrained. It was
But in
ingrained
this
in
one,
those
it's just
minds.
like first there's one girl dancing in front of Perrin, then there's two, then there's three, and he like can't handle it. And again, Perrin, has anybody ever been more wrong about anything
Yeah.
than
That's
Perrin
some
is
Wikipedia
about
right
Rand
there.
and girls? Like,
Okay.
where is he even getting this idea that Rand would have
This,
any idea what to do?
this is the unreliable narrator.
Super unreliable.
And I mean, all these things, they just end up being ones that I enjoy, you know? I hear you about like similarities and quality, but I think it's supposed to be similar, right? Where each of them thinks that the other one knows more than they do.
Hmm.
And then the similarity of they're not really good with women. None of them are. And just sort of that innocence, right? Going out of the big wide world. But yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly repetitive. We're getting similar reactions from different members of the crew.
He knows about girls. What are you
He
talking
knows
about?
about girls.
Get out of
I don't
here.
know, man. I did want to. There is something I'm excited to talk about at the end. Not that it takes long, but I did want to talk about the dream sequence
Right.
because this was a much more seen dream sequence.
Yeah.
So I was curious about your reactions to it.
I mean, it just didn't do anything new though, right?
Right.
Like it's just kind of like the same ground. Now there's a
Treading
wolf
water.
in there as well. But it's just
Right.
like, yeah, Balsamon pays another visit. Hey, what's up? Checking in.
Mhm.
You're not gonna get away
Right.
from me if you're the one. And
Right.
like, it did. That's what I'm saying. Like this chapter, I was just like, my instinct would just be to just scrap this whole wandering people, traveling people part. Like when I'm writing, like I'm more and more feeling, and maybe it is just that people's attention spans are different now. I mean, I've read some long books. I can say like I read Anna Karenina, and I didn't feel like at any point like it was just treading water. I mean, there's many. I guess if we do Lit versus genre again, that would be one to look at because it also splits its story. Like you're not just with Anna Karenina the whole time. You're with like other members of the family, particularly. I guess he would be her cousin. It's kind of like a split love story. I mean, she gets the title, but at least half of the book is this male protagonist and his
Oh,
like
okay. I've never read it, so
love.
I'd be into it.
Yeah. It was like really surprisingly readable to me because I mean I hadn't read Tolstoy before. I haven't read War and Peace, but like I was like, okay, here we go. And then I was like, oh, this was like very readable, went really fast, and like so it's
I've
not
been
just
wanting
that I'm
to read some
allergic to
Tolstoy
length.
lately.
Wait, say that again.
I've actually been wanting to read some Tolstoy lately. It's just sort of been coming up more in my life, like Tolstoy just mentioned here or there, So no, I'd be very, very into that. Obviously, I think we got to work on the length of whatever we're reading and the translation of that to video. But I'm up for it. Yeah, no, let's do some Tolstoy here sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
sounds
we
cool.
could do War and Peace. I've never read it, so that would be one
I've
like
never heard of it.
where we're both
Yeah.
going in the dark.
Oh, that could be cool considering I know we're like game planning our show as we're talking about this.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think that sounds great since we've each just done one, which was a story that we were both passionate about and wanting to share with the other person. And now we could do some reading of stuff we haven't, you know.
Yeah.
That could even be interesting to eventually do of a fantasy series like that I've never read. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so it could be like my reactions. Do I like it? Do I not?
Right,
Why?
right, right.
Yeah, no, cool. But I get what you're saying. You're not allergic to the length. You're allergic to a thing that just feels like it's doing nothing. It's treading
Yeah,
water,
that's just kind of
right?
marking time. And I
Hmm.
do get that like okay, world building fills in that point
Right.
of interest a bit. But and maybe I would have bought that in the first traveling people chapter, but now I feel like I know the
Hmm.
traveling people and I really
Right.
did feel like this dream sequence was very much
Hmm.
repetitive. Although I did like he's
It
just
is
like
the
at the
exciting
door.
incident.
He's just like that.
He's just there at the
Yeah,
farmhouse.
he's just visiting. We're all having
I just
breakfast.
roll up the I just roll up to farmhouses.
Yeah,
And
here's
then,
the line. Belzman stepped into the kitchen from the yard. I do
I
like
know,
how
right?
like simple
I
that
know.
sentence is.
It's just
It's
like
like
boom.
it's like the opposite of the Lolita intro, right? Where like it's built
He's
up
just there.
so much, and then this is like, oh hey, well how oh is breakfast cooking? All right, right. I'm just
Right?
in time, just in time for
I mean,
breakfast.
she's still working on it. So, but I was gonna say that it is the inciting incident for them like leaving, right? But I do hear that it's the same. I don't know. It's fascinating because I love it, right? And I think that's the divide between. But again,
Wait, you
that could
love this
also be
dream
the
sequence, or you love like hanging
oh
out with the
no, the
Tinkers?
dream sequence. I'm just like whatevs.
Right.
But I mean, don't get me wrong. I like what it shows about the wolf, though. I do question. I'm like, which wolf died, right? Because it seems like a wolf died, seemingly. Like if a wolf died in the dream, did it really die, kind of thing?
Like
Like got hurt.
Inception.
Yeah, well, just because we've seen them get like we've seen the rats die, right?
Mm,
Or you know what I'm saying? Or we've seen like Rand get hurt and then he's blood, and but then he seems to leave this dream without anything, but then the wolves are freaked out, right?
right.
So I'm just like curious, sort of what happened there, right? Um, but I will say that again, I know people do bounce off this first book, And I bet it's chapters like this that do it because I think people want the epic immersion, and this is going further than some people want, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
people want the Tuatha in the first chapter. Cool, right? But then this, did we really, right? Did we really just need to live with them? And I'm like, yes. But a lot of, I do understand how others could be like, no, thank you.
Yeah. All right. I don't think I had anything else about this chapter specifically, unless you did.
Just the end. I think it is so beautiful and so incredible.
Oh.
Um, just about the end with Egwene talking about how the woman was like helping her become a better woman. And he laughs like, nobody helps us men. And she's like, and that's the
Right.
problem. Like, I just feel as if even, I don't know, today, well, not this day specifically, but recently I was talking with like, guys about sharing emotion and how there's not a lot of support system for that. And recently, oh, I don't know, I was talking with this guy and he was saying that he was listening to, it was a woman who was, I don't know if she was a psychologist or not, but she was definitely looking to help people and be like a coach and stuff. And she was asking, she was like, guys, what do you do when, like, who do you reach out to when you've got a problem, right? Like, who's your point of contact when as a man, you've got an issue? And the responses were, reach out. What do you
Right.
ask? What do you, no,
Right.
you just keep going, right? Like you ignore that or you just deal with it and then you move on. So now obviously how much of that is generational, right? I think it's still happening to a degree, even for those in maybe 20s or 30s. But just felt, even though I'm holding a book that literally says 30th year anniversary, like on its front,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that just line felt very, very time, applicable even now. And it was just really cool. It was a fun moment for me.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice line.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So, shall we go on then? I get, man, this
Yeah.
feels
Let's
so
do it.
short. It feels like we're flying. Now I'm paranoid that it's gonna be too
What
short.
are we missing?
I guess the only other I guess this is a minor
You're,
criticism.
you're pulling.
I'll
You're
find
like,
I'll
I
find
gotta find
something.
something. I gotta find something.
Well, I
Go
did
for it.
highlight this last thing
Do it.
about the
Do it.
wolves, and like
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing that I find strange about the wolves as
Mm-hmm.
characters. So he
Okay.
set up this device where he can just read their minds.
Right.
I'm also like a little confused. I'm assuming the wolves can't read each other's minds.
That does seem to get answered at the end of that line you highlighted.
That was the whole life of they seem to ignore Dapple seem to ignore the thoughts of both. So they can, and Dapple is
Yeah.
purposefully ignoring.
Right.
Interesting. So but on a story level, what I think is interesting about this is that
Mm-hmm.
this is like definition of tell not show. And I was like, and it's because well, how are you going to show the character? Like you've anthropomorphized these wolves,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, physically they're not there. Even when they
Right.
are there physically, like how are you showing their character? I guess like I would almost like it more. I guess you could still do it because they can like think things at him and he can basically
Yeah.
talk, so they can kind of just have a conversation, and you could be showing their characters more than again this big block paragraph where you're literally just like telling me their characters.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying about the classic. For me, it works perfectly how it is because then we get the contrast of when we see them, how they're just like noble meeting equals, and we know this from what he's knowing. So it's again this like alternate society, and that's what I love about these chapters. Like we're getting to see the Tuatha and their concern of Elias and like their reactions to his acts. So we're seeing like one society and their reactions, and then we're seeing the wolves and sort of their society and how he just sort of gets impressions and thoughts of all of them. So it is a very different way to be learning about a group of people. And I hear you that technically it would be telling, but it seems appropriate due to the mechanism of communication that this species or group uses
Well, I
with each
mean,
other.
again, appropriate, sure, but like narratively effective, maybe not. Right. So like when I bring up
Yeah,
this, I don't just mean like I don't buy it. Like I buy it, in the
Right,
story,
right.
but like it's not the most interesting way to present character.
What was it just because it was such a big block, you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like
Okay. I'm just curious.
Hopper was a scarred and grizzled fighter, impassive with the knowledge of years, with guile that more than made up for anything of which age might have robbed him. It's just that's just dull, you know. Like it's just not. It's not very specific. We talked about specificity in our last Lolita. Like there's nothing specific about that sentence. It's very general. It's like it's like the horoscope version of character development. Like you're just saying like very kind of banal. Sure, this is I guess what's different about Hopper, but it's not put in an interesting way or shown in an interesting way, and it's just handed to you. And it's the it just being handed to you thing that makes it less. I don't know, just less exciting. Like I was kind of like, I'm not digging this paragraph. I would rather find out about these wolves by being around these wolves and
You're
seeing
saying
them
like,
do things.
do we need this here?
Yeah,
Could
I
we
almost
just
think,
experience them?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that would be an alternate way to do it. For me, I don't see one as more effective than the other, but I certainly see how it could have been done the other way, for sure.
yeah. I mean, I think it would be more effective to the point where it's almost kind of cliched writing advice, not to do this because it doesn't play as well. It's not as engaging to have your character development just told uh, to the
Yeah,
reader.
yeah. No, I hear that. I mean, there are certain times where it can work and be appropriate. Obviously, the advantage of this type is that it allows you to condense this sort of information, as opposed to getting this sort of character in scene. Then we would need a scene with the wolves and seeing how they're all acting. And in this part, we sort of cut away from them. I suppose, of course, the argument could be, well, we could have that scene instead of this time with the Tuathalan,
Yeah,
right?
and
Like
the
if we were
and
doing a one-on-one
well,
swap.
and also the scene. If the scene is just the scene should be doing something else as well, right? Like I would say, like what I'm suggesting would be more condensing because you would have a scene where important plot things are happening, and you're also learning about the character through their actions at the same time, and you don't have to write this whole paragraph just describing their characters.
Right. I think and this tying to your previous question about like, length and epic, I do think length and epic have become synonymous with each other because when a story does take a longer period of time, it feels more epic because you had to
Mm.
like go through that journey, right? And so we sort of feel the journey that they're taking due to the length. So, um, yeah. I was just thinking about when you said condensed. Obviously, I realize it doesn't apply to this singular paragraph because we're already talking about that we could swap this paragraph for in scene with with the wolves
Hmm.
plot moving forward, replacing this chapter, and that would actually make it shorter overall, despite the fact that this would be lengthening. Um, but I do wonder, yeah, it's that balancing act, right? It seems like he chose here to go for I want to spend more time with the Tuathalan as opposed to a scene now with the wolves to maybe have a scene later with the wolves. I don't know. I wonder how much of it too is he wanted to show this alternate way of communication where sort of
Hmm.
everyone knows each other's thoughts and
Yeah.
kind of who you are. I
Yeah.
wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, why is Dapple? What isn't Dapple the leader? Dapple,
Yeah, she
don't
is.
ignore, don't ignore their thoughts. That's not a very good leader. You gotta be you gotta be in
No,
touch with your people.
no, Dapple's like, you just do what I say, and that's how
Oh
we
damn.
roll.
Oh okay, I'm
That's how
getting it
we do.
now. Dapple has more
No, no,
authoritarian style than.
exactly. No, I'm glad you brought that paragraph up though, because it is, you're right. It's a perfect example of just like, here, I'm going to tell you who a character is,
Right.
which if you're reading like a normal story, you'd be like, I'm sorry, what did you just do? Like, no,
Right.
get that off the page. But because it's about wolves and this sort of like thought, dreamy speak, it's
Mm,
like, cool, So
that gives
I
it the
do wonder about,
pass for you.
right. Well, yeah. Well, again, using like different tools for different things makes it feel different. Like this, if this is the only time that we learn about characters like this,
Hmm.
you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Then it does create this sense of other, which is kind of cool for
Mm.
a group that's other. So I think that's because I'm just trying to dissect in the moment as well, beyond just saying like it worked for me. Like why, right? I do actually think the fact that it's using a different writing tool than we've normally seen helps accentuate for me this sort of otherness of how wolf communication is and how you just know somebody. And that seems neat to me. But I do, of course, get your point that, yeah, it's straight telling.
All right, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. Let's move on. Unless there's anything else you want to say there
No, no, I'm
about
good.
those
I'm
people.
good. I'm glad we went back to that. I know you were feeling like there must be more, but I think that was a really good more. I'm glad we talked about that because I think that just showcases how, again, I know that there's not an agreement that that was the perfect example of when telling's okay, but I do think it is interesting to think about all the tools you got in your toolbox and when each one can potentially be used.
All right. So, Nynaeve.
Mhm.
Way back with Nynaeve. I also, so I think it's kind of interesting. Wait, what was our symbol for that last chapter? Because I'm noticing
It was the
that
leaf. It was the leaf.
the leaf. Oh,
Yeah.
this that leaf again. All right.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm noticing. Well, I feel like with the Rand chapters, when we get these groups, it's like we have the POV character, and then we have the character they're with's symbol,
Yeah.
which is kind
Right.
of just like we get Tom's harp if we're with Rand, we
Mm.
get the Leafs.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that's Elias when we're with Perrin.
Two Hawthorne or Elias. Yeah.
And we get Moraine's staff when we're with Nynaeve. Okay,
No, you're right. You're right about that.
so Nynaeve is, up to her old nonsense. Um,
How are they going to play this in the show? How are they going to do it? That's the question.
yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, my
Go for it.
thoughts about this as I was reading this part here. This almost felt like. Have you seen those memes where it's like they go, "Oh, JK," or just joking, unless. Like they say something like, and then they go, "Oh, no, no, I'm just joking. Oh, unless you really want me to," like that kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And like that was the meme that
Yeah.
popped into my head here about Nynaeve because it's so kind of ridiculous. Her
Okay.
thought process. She would go there if need be. I don't want to go there. I mean, if you're gonna force this training on me,
Right.
okay, but not for your reasons. Like I just
Yep.
can't buy her. I cannot buy her at all. And I guess maybe that's a good character. Like, is this on par with seeing around Humpert?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe it's just my
You knew
bias
what I
where
was
I
going to
feel
ask.
like this is so much clunkier than that, but it feels so much clunkier than that. Like it.
Yeah, I mean, she's very obviously a lot of what she thinks is wrong, right?
Right.
So then that's the question, right? Like, wait, if she's just clear, if I know she's wrong or know she's being ridiculous, how do I view that sort of character? That again, unreliable kind of narrator
Right.
character. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it is in Lolita, even though I know that guy's full of shit. He like sells it better, or like it's like I could believe he believes it more than like,
Oh, you don't know why she believes it.
yeah,
We've come up against this before, right? Like, why does she hate Aes Sedai so much? Why does she hate the power so much? Whereas in Lolita, he gives a treatise on nymphets, right? And like why
right,
he loves them the way he does.
right.
Whereas here, we're not seeing like if you knew more of what made her this type of person,
I
then
think
it could be more
so.
believable.
He has such an
Yeah?
elaborate scaffolding
Right,
for his belief
exactly.
system that you're
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
even though this is clearly self-deluded, I get as a
Right.
reader know it's self-deluded. I can
Hmm.
buy that this person believes their own bullshit.
Right. Right.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I have a really
Hmm.
hard trouble buying that then he believes her own bullshit. So she just comes across as like dumb or ridiculous in a
Yeah.
laughable way to me. as opposed to like,
That
oh cool, I'm seeing like
mhm.
this unreliable narrator's thoughts, you know? And also that is maybe that it's in third person too makes it hard.
I do think third person creates more difficulty for unreliable narrators.
Mm-hmm.
At least, man, we were talking about that. Well, now the videos just mixed together. I think we were talking about that in Lolita, that before I wasn't really familiar with unreliable narrators. Even though this is my favorite book, I didn't really think of her as an unreliable narrator at the time. I just sort of
Mm-hmm.
thought of her as, oh, that's naive. She's super combative. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, and obviously she's making mistakes. She's obviously wrong about things, but I just thought that's how she was. She's someone who makes mistakes, basically.
Right.
But now that I've got a more clear handle on the naming of that, right? And now comparability between, it's funny to think that my favorite series had one like all along. Um, but yeah, it's fascinating looking at the different ones. Like from one of my main problems with Name of the Wind, even though it's a
Hmm.
loved series, is that yeah, his stuff just seems too ridiculous. It's too just like I'm amazing, everything I do is amazing.
Hmm.
I'm solid gold. And then people will be like, but wait, it doesn't all add up. And I'm like, but for him it does, and I'm reading about how it does most of the time. So
Right.
like for me, it might as well be true because we only
Hmm.
get like little hints that maybe it's not.
Hmm.
Um, I'm basically reading about him being amazing the whole time,
Right.
which feels
That
unrealistic.
needs to be
So
punctured for if you're
right,
gonna realize that the author intent is to show
exactly.
you the falsity of this.
Precisely, precisely. So to me, I would say this doesn't have the problem that I've got in, say, Name of the Wind, for
Uh-huh.
instance, where to me it is obvious that she's wrong.
Commenters,
Um,
if you love Name of the Wind, please comment
I know
below. Let us
this is
know
the time
down
to
in the
flame
comments.
Jeff. No, Name of the Wind is hugely loved, and I see why. On a prose level, I feel we should do a chapter of Name of the
Hmm.
Wind at some point, just because when people talk about like what's a literary fantasy novel, it's almost always going to be Elderlings or Name of the Wind that's
Okay.
brought up, Robin Hobb or Patrick Rothfuss. And I do agree. It is very you can be transported away by the sentences, and you can tell care and time was spent with them.
Hmm.
Um, and so that is really cool. Uh, but yeah, so that was sort of my so yeah, people feel free, flame me for Name of the Wind, as Steve has requested. But I was going to say, I think the problem here, and I think that's what you're getting at too, is the unlikability, right? Like she just seems unlikable and ridiculous and like a caricature of a person.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and how can that necessarily be fun to read, right?
Yeah.
Um, mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
like cuz and maybe that's the other thing like when you read it first you just thought it was like straightforward. Like
Yeah.
I think this is a thing where you have to guess that author intent. It feels
Mhm.
less fulfilling. I mean, maybe people will claim that's more interesting that the author intent isn't handed to you. But
Right.
then it also creates this thing where like you're like, wait, did the author mean it that way? Like, am I supposed to be realizing like she secretly really wants this, but she's not admitting it to
Mhm.
herself? Because that is interesting, but
Right.
because it's not clear, I could also just read it as this is a really weird character. Like this character is whack and doesn't make sense. And so that's why I think clarity is really important. I do kind of dislike it when people are like, oh no, this is the genius of it, is that it was ambiguous and you didn't know. And it's like, I mean, I feel like when that sort of thing is done really well, that's the skill of the author. That's the skill of the author on display, that you know it.
Mhm.
That you, without them having to say it, you know it for sure. And that's
Mhm.
actually really
Mhm.
hard to do, right? Anybody can kind of be
Right.
ambiguous and then everybody gets to pick their own meaning. And like, maybe that's not actually that good. Maybe that's a lot easier to do than to make the reader aware of something without directly telling them.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, again, transporting myself back in time, right? Like it's tough because now I know who Nynaeve, I think it is, becomes. So I'm
Mm,
colored by that,
mm,
right? Like it's so hard for me to just read her the way she is. So when I read it now, it's just like, oh, Nave, you, you know, like you acting the way you are. And so I do think the advantage of someone
She's
being
gonna
like this, being
become
very,
number one Aes Sedai queen of all time, isn't she?
right. So I mean, I can't say that, but someone being as combative and standoffish and arrogant as she is and unlikable in that way, you do get the chance for change, right?
Mm.
But then there's that risk, right? There's always the risk, like, will the reader read someone like that, right?
Mm.
So I do wonder if how much is this purposeful? We put this caustic character, which the reader might not like, who gets annoyed by someone who's just quiet, right? Um, around these really interesting people that we do want to know more about. Um, so, because I'm sure people do want to know more about Moraine and Lan. Heck, that's probably why the show is focusing on Bran, because people want to know about Moraine and Lan, right? But it feels purposeful, this placement of, let me put my most caustic character next to who are arguably the most interesting, most knowledgeable people.
Right on. So
Keep its reader going.
speaking
Hmm.
of, let's see, some more Moraine and Land. So this is obviously wrong. I even like reread a little bit.
Hmm.
If only there was some way to get rid of the woman.
Right.
So here she's like, if only there was some way I could get alone with Lan. Land would be better by himself. A warder should be able to handle what was needed, she told herself hastily, feeling a sudden flush. And so this is the other thing that did it, because so far, anytime anybody flushes, it's because they got the hots for somebody else. Like we just saw
Obviously.
in the previous chapter, Perrin flushing all over the place every
Right.
time, the fifth
Hmm.
girl came up
Hmm.
to dance in front of him. Rand has
I don't blame
been
him. Let it go.
the same way that he flushes every time he's
Right.
in a situation with girls. So then Nynaeve's sitting here thinking, man, if there's only some way to get rid
Oh,
of
yeah.
Moraine. And then no other reason but one meant the other. Should be handled what was needed, she told herself hastily. Lan would be better by himself. No other reason. Oh. So, like, okay, because, like, here's the M dashes.
Yeah, there's name dash.
So let's say I took that out of the sentence. Lan would be better by himself, but one meant the other. Okay, gotcha. But Lan means Moraine. Got it. But,
Right.
and then the other thing that led to my reading of that was then she, like, checks out Lan's dreamy eyes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Could have done without his cool blue eyes. Oh, really, Nynaeve? Is this another unreliable narrator
Well, I
moment
mean,
here?
I think I mean, but so this one I would say is clear, like we're getting it in the moment, um, of it happening. You know what I mean? Um,
I mean, they
so I
are
do
both
think
expert trackers. They could,
exactly.
post-coital have tracking
Yeah.
conversations.
Exactly. But yeah, so I mean, we do get it. We get that right there, the sudden flush, and then her annoyance at him, right? So I do think it's slam shaded, the way she feels and that she is not honest with herself and the way she's flip-flopping about, listening to the wind, but the power. I mean, to me, she is an interesting character because she's very conflicted. She has these beliefs, but she's got all these things that are going against them, but she's resisting going against them. I do agree getting more knowledge about why she has the strong beliefs that she does would be nice. Like if we did get a bit more scaffolding of like what has created this very strong belief system she is entrenched in, which is why she's putting up this fight,
I
right?
mean,
But I do think it is fun to watch someone fight.
I think I am not going to argue against internal conflict. I think that's almost the whole name of the game, right?
Right.
But
Sure.
why this isn't working right here for me is that, like, maybe because Jordan wants to telegraph that so much, she's not consistent in her own thoughts, right? So, like,
Hmm.
that it feels like a clunky way to do the internal conflict. Like, I feel like what you want is the arrows pointing one way, and then maybe her actions start to point another way, so that it's not like
Hmm.
literally on the page, unless right? Like that unless I feel like is so clunky. Like she should just be
Mm.
consistent in her thought. Like, no, I'm not gonna do this. What? That's crazy. No matter
Oh, I
what
see
she
what you're saying.
thinks,
Yeah.
no way, period. And then she gets there, and then she's like, ah, God, I guess I'll do this one. Or like maybe you don't have her think unless, but she's like, oh, in this situation, I need to use this magic. Let me use it. Something has brought me to this point where it's a crisis point now, and
Mhm.
I need to do it, or like do it in a way there where we see that her desire points another way than her words, without the text literally going, "Oh, I think this, but then I think this." Does that make
Yeah, I mean,
sense?
no, no, it does. It does. I hear you. I mean, I think the way you're describing it is certainly one way to show that sort of conflict. I think this is just another way, that where someone does waffle in their mind with thoughts. Now, obviously, we talk about like which way is more effective, which is going to lead to a bigger hit for the reader, right?
Mm.
But the way in Inave is she's constantly waffling like sort of about everything. You know what I mean? But well, very strong opinions one way, like I hate them, I don't want to be near them, but I have to be near them.
Mm.
Like, give me answers. Why won't you give me answers? Tell me answers now. I hate you. I'm scared of you. Like, so she is very, very back and forth in her things, but I would say she's consistent in that, which is
Mm.
what makes
Mm.
her understandable to me. Um, so yeah, no, I mean, I hear you that if we were just talking about like for one character, one thing that was happening, then yeah, that would likely be cleaner, what you're describing. We got a lot of characters, a lot of different conflicts, so I think having this one that waffles back and forth showcases difference in character as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it just makes me kind of annoyed with her, and also makes me feel like
Mhm.
this is just being
Right.
handed to me instead. Like, a lot of comments, things in comments have been like, "Well, Steve doesn't want to work for stuff," right? And it's like, I mean, this is one of the things. I guess I don't want to work for it, but I want to have the pleasure of seeing it, as opposed to like I think one thing and then I think another thing, which feels very. I mean, I get that's her character. I'm not super like hype about that character. I guess I think it just kind of like makes me think she's
Right.
ridiculous, as opposed to if she was consistent in her thoughts, I would be like, okay, she's deluding herself, but she believes it, right? Like
Right.
she
Right.
believes her own bullshit, and here she clearly doesn't believe her own bullshit. It almost makes her like a point of comedy, like
Yeah,
clownish, and
for
I
sure.
think that's yeah. I don't like it. I mean, maybe that's cool that that's her character, but it's like,
Yeah, I was
ugh,
like,
I don't like her at all.
right. No, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, again, if we take that's what I'm wondering how they're going to do her in the show, right?
Yeah.
Are they going to make her this unlikable?
And we
Because
talked.
yeah,
What's also
yeah, we
interesting
talked
is
about
we
it before.
talked about likability in Lolita, and I and
Mhm.
I railed against likability. Eh,
You did.
but I think like Humper, I think it's a difference between do I like you as a person, or do I like, is there something about this character that I
It's the
obviously
thing.
like enough to read about them,
No, sure,
right?
sure. No, and I
Maybe
completely,
instead
completely.
of likable, I should say interesting. I don't think I find
Yeah,
that flipping back and forth like that interesting or that
interesting.
intriguing. And the
Exactly.
intrigue is when you don't spell it out, because if you don't spell it out completely, you get a little intrigue about it. You still want it to read, like you want the reader to understand that she's conflicted about this, but when you like a wolf thought, you just spell it out and put it there. It's
The
not
wolf
it's
thought.
not as grabbing.
But this way we get clarity, Steve.
We
No,
do get
I'm
clarity
just
for
messing
sure.
with you. I was messing with you. No, obviously, and I mean, this is what makes writing fun to talk about,
Yeah.
right? Is that there are these, it's so many little nuances like this. You can't just say X is the
Mm-hmm.
way, right? Because yeah, like we want clarity, but we don't want it spoon fed. And we want, like
Mm-hmm.
that's this whole balance. You got to be thinking the progression of stories. Like people used to just tell stories that happened.
Right.
Then people made up stories. But if people made up stories that were too ridiculous, people didn't like those. They wanted them to have like some grounding, right? And so we're all fighting for this sweet spot of like, how can I make up that right story that like gets you and it gets you involved? And it's a massive balancing act with lots of components. But I do think interesting is as you just said there, and I think we talked about this well in our other video, that's kind of a better word than likability, right? Because there's many things that someone can find interesting. Liking someone could be one of them, or it could be something else. And so I do think interesting becomes a better way to talk about a particular character than likability. I think likability gets thrown around a lot because that's one of the big ones. It's one of the very common ones. We like a lot of people want to cheer for something. I've talked about that too. But I would certainly agree it's not the only reason why we'd want to read somebody. And yeah, that's the thing. I think a lot of people don't like and don't find the name interesting.
Yeah, I think a word that maybe we should replace for likable is compelling. Compelling's, I think, ultimately the goal, and whether she's compelling at this part or not, yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, if people got to choose, like, whose perspective do you want to see next? I think people would perhaps grudgingly pick the name just to see what's happening with Moraine Land, right? And to your point, I mean, and what do we get? We get the icon for Moraine, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, I get to see Moraine. So it all feels purposeful for me. And I think it's the long game. I think he's playing a very long game here. Like, I'm going to give you someone that you may not like, that you may find bleh. But, there's a reason for where it's going to end up going. And it's risky. I mean, I'm doing that in my story, and people are I've definitely had some readers be like, this character. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Interesting.
But, so,
Yeah.
I mean, not just regular readers, but like a writing group, so,
right.
but we'll see. We'll see how it all comes together. It can be a risk for sure.
So here is something where I now just had a thought that just occurred to me here. So we have a Robert Jordan ellipses, of course.
Of course.
Classic. Moraine could say what
She could.
was going to happen when he got strong enough to do whatever. That would be stakes setting for me, because I don't know what bad is going to happen precisely. I assume something vaguely horrible is going to happen, but I don't know. And like, again, what are we missing out by her not saying what will happen when he's strong enough? Right. So here's my new theory. And I've kind of wondered about this with like some comic book writers, that have a series. It's going to have to go and go and go and go and go. And of course, this is mythology. Actually, I just sent you the video of Why the Last Man show coming out, and this of course was a long-running, much beloved comic book series, which
that's good to know. I didn't realize it was long-running.
Oh yeah, this is a very long series, and Robert K. Vaughan has had like a few series that have ended up being very long, and he always talked about how he, I think we've already talked about this, like know the ending, but don't really know what's going to happen in between as it goes. And so that's like one kind of, I guess, style if you're going to do a series. Now, a lot of comic book series just don't have an end, period. But then people kind of set up things that then play out later or come back up later in a series. And I've often wondered how often, because as you all know, writing like a rough draft of something, you often just kind of don't know yourself. Right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
You'll just throw something in there. You'll just go, boom, let me throw this in here. And then like later on you go, oh, this could be what that was referring to or what that was doing. Sure. And this feels to me like if I'm writing along, how much longer before he is strong enough to ... Me as a writer, that's like I actually do not know what Moraine was about to say there. I'm just gonna put that there, and yeah, I'll figure it out later. When I'm further along in the book, I'll be like, okay, it's strong enough to do this. But it just feels like a total cheat that I or like many comic book writers would do. Now, again, I know I need to be sold on this mythology that Robert Jordan the genius had 10, 12, however many it is, 1,000-page
Right.
books all planned out. That is hard for me to wrap my mind around, that is actually true. And this feels like another part when I was reading, I was like, is this why these ellipses are here? Because maybe he didn't know at the moment. I'm sure he figured it out later and then filled it all back in so it works really nicely, but maybe he didn't know. And maybe that's why we're getting all these ellipses.
You know, it's funny because, I mean, we just talked about it, so it's not a spoiler for me to say it now. But, I mean, just, again, it was an alternate video. Not that people need to go watch the later video to get these references, but we were conversing about things back and forth, which has been great to talk about the unreliable narrator. I'm actually really glad we're doing both, even though we're going to put a brief pause on Lolita so we can do these double chapters. But anyway, point is, for this, when we had talked about stakes and how it felt like this story didn't have stakes, I was like, well, no, Steve, we know the stakes. It's like the end of the world is the stakes, right? But then you point out a moment like this, and I'm like, oh, maybe the stakes aren't as clear as I thought they were in retrospective reading, right? Perhaps it all has been alluding to this, we don't want the Dark One free because atrocity you cannot even imagine will be
right, and that's hard stakes to sell, like a
right,
vague
right,
horribleness. Okay, I get vague horribleness, but it would be more horrible if it was something I could clearly picture and know, like what.
Well, I don't know. I feel like there's differing things about that. Or like if someone doesn't say, then people can invent something more horrible than you could come up with, kind of thing. You've heard that argument before, though, right? Like I'm not the only one. Like it'll be worse. Like they'll dream up something even worse. I've seen it in movies, right? Where they just like they're in an interrogation room, right? And they just lay out like all these tools, and then they just like leave for the person to sweat.
Mm-hmm.
And then while they're standing out there with someone else, you're like, what was that for though? Like you didn't like say what you were going to do. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. He'll come up with way worse use for those tools than I could ever imagine. Like that idea,
right.
But I'm not saying that's a definite thing here. I just wonder if that was the thought, like to just make it this vague horribleness and then we come up with it. But it doesn't feel like that's really being pushed either. So, yeah. I'm glad you highlighted this.
Yeah, it's just somewhere where I was like, here's where I could get the stakes. I could know, what the consequence of this was. But of course she doesn't say it. Of course, and that's the pattern. That's Moraine. That's the pattern that I'm sensing here.
That's the pattern. No, I just want a shirt that says Moraine.
That's the pattern.
In response to Moraine. Now, the thing that immediately came into my head, I want to know when in Lord of the Rings it's made clear that Sauron getting the other ring will then like give him back all his old power to where he can just like crush everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like because obviously in the movie that stake is given to us, right?
Yeah.
And I'm even curious, like when in the movie is that stake given to us? But I know it is. I know they
immediately. I think in the movie has like a prologue, unless the extended cut is different. And what I just watched recently was the extended cut, but it just has this prologue of the battle where it cuts off the finger, and then the guy gets the ring and he starts like losing it.
Sure.
So you kind of know immediately that the ring is super bad news and it's just going to wreck whoever has it. And even kind of putting aside the Mordor and the forces of darkness will rule everything. Like that ring itself, I would say the more important stakes are, does Frodo like go evil? Or like, does Frodo get tempted so much by the ring? That seems like more like the thing that you're worried about throughout. And you know that immediately.
No, you're right, you do. Because I was comparing this to like the same sort of idea, right? Because obviously, clearly, this story was influenced by Lord of the Rings. And you've got this big bad that's gone, but slowly resurfacing, right? Like we had with Sauron, like we got with the Dark One here. And then the Dark One is beginning to touch the world as Sauron is beginning to touch the world, right? Yeah. This evil that shall not be named. Anyway, but point is that, you're totally right. We know from the get-go this ring is terrible, and it's in the possession of a cute little hobbit. Right. That's awful. They like breakfast.
Yeah.
So... no, completely. I would agree. Now, obviously, I would say the stakes here is like we're being chased, right?
Hmm.
And that someone wants to capture us who's evil, so will they be caught,
Right,
right?
right.
So I think that that's what they're going for.
Mm.
Robert is going for. But yeah, for both I just think that the Lord of the Rings one is a little bit clearer. But now I'm wondering, now I want to like flip back and see. I mean, I want to say that in the prologue of this book, that the guy that's facing Luther and Telamon basically like says, the Dark One will touch the world and, you know, everything will be, his. And
Show
then
us on the
there's
world doll where the Dark One touched you.
right, the world shall be his. But then also we get that the Dragon Reborn caused the breaking of the world. So we are worried about Rand going crazy. But if we're not following Rand, you're not getting that same sense of plot urgency,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, because that could have been the story, right? Like it could have just been Rand just chasing him. Is he going to go crazy? Um,
Mm.
how soon?
Interesting.
But yeah, it feels like how do you do that? Just that story. Yeah, no. Anyway, but yeah, no, I'm really glad you marked that part. It just made me think about Lord of the Rings and wondering how soon we get that. And yeah, it is curious. I mean, to me, it feels very Gandalf. Where Gandalf would like he did not always give all the information, and so of course Moraine does not always give
Right.
all the information, which makes her seem wiser than she knows, more than she says. The horror is implied. But yeah, no, this was I obviously don't have a definite answer for this, but I enjoyed talking about it.
All right. So one thing I did appreciate about them wandering into town here is that finally somebody was pro Aes Sedai here, which like surprised me because I was so used to everybody being like
Right?
anti Aes Sedai. So I did appreciate
Well,
this voice of reason, whoever this
the
nameless town
the women,
person
right?
was.
Right.
Um,
Well, yeah, it was it's this group of women, right? Yeah, several women
yeah, yeah,
lower their
yeah.
voices conspiratorially, right? So of course it's
It's
like the
so bad all
women
the
want to bring in the women to
sexes.
fix it.
That's
Oh,
so
it's
funny.
totally completely. Oh, completely.
All right. All right. Oh, and
Uh,
the queen. So this came from the
mhm.
comments. Scott filled me in on the
Right,
queen. This is not Queen of the Aes Sedai. This is like
right.
literally is their queen of like the whole
Exactly.
thing. All right.
Exactly.
So I didn't even know there was a queen
Yeah.
of everyone
No, no.
until that was
Well,
was she
it's not.
mentioned before the innkeeper said shouldn't a person get to see their
Um,
queen
well, no, I'm trying to remember. No, it's come up more as they've traveled because she's the queen of this area,
of this
is the
area?
idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't feel like that's a huge spoiler, but um, yeah. Because yeah, when you look at the map, it's not as clear as like you're entering this kingdom's thing.
Hmm.
Like we will get more information about it relatively soon.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I'm wondering how much we need to know. I mean, I could see that confusion, Queen of the Aes Sedai, Queen of just Queen. Yeah. But yeah, this does, I think, create some clarity. I wonder how this would have been if you hadn't heard from Scott. I mean, I'm glad you did, so you know. And thank you to Scott for the comments. We do see them and continue to appreciate them. But yeah, so this one starts to bring some clarity
Oh,
now, I think.
right, yeah. It's just, yeah, it would still not be total clarity.
Right.
Right. Like, I might still think that was Queen of the Aes Sedai or something.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
When,
sure.
but anyway, okay. So,
So for me, the enjoyment of this chapter, just to toss it in there real quick, is of course getting to see the same place. The story continues, right? But from a different perspective,
hmm
that we're seeing, the aftermath of this and like some buildings burn and people not talking about it, which did make me think of the reveal thing that you were saying. Um, and then, um, and then the boat being chased away, which, is like Daman and everything,
hmm
and her getting to walk across White Bridge and just sort of seeing the aftermath of it all. Like I think the other thing I read for besides time with Tuathalan in philosophies would be getting to see events from different viewpoints is just something I absolutely geek out about and why I love multiple viewpoint narratives, even though they can end up becoming these like behemoths that are too long and too big for their own good and that are crushed under their own weight.
So what you're telling me
But
is you're really hype about the Amazon spin-off show of the traveling people, and you just hang
yes,
out
give
with
me
their
give me the
dancing
travel,
and their
give me
okay.
the travel. Well, as long as we also get the wolf philosophy, I like seeing the different
Yeah.
philosophies of the different groups, like what they believe. So yeah, no, I mean, if we're just traveling around and seeing that, that is cool to me. I do think it would be pretty crazy bold if they ever did an Amazon series or something where it was just each person in one of these crazy books, right? So
Mm.
like season one is like just Rand,
Mm-hmm.
like season two just Perrin. It wouldn't work at all, but it would be funny. But yeah, so that for me is I think also a driving force of this chapter is yeah, with Nynaeve, but we're getting answers from Marina Lan and we're getting to see the aftermath, especially after Tom's death. Like what happened? Is he dead? And obviously Nynaeve isn't asking those questions, but obviously a reader would be. So
Mm.
I think that creates some tenseness.
All right. Yeah, so the journey continues.
I,
We're
you
basically
felt none of
ditching
that.
Rand is what we're doing now because
Oh my
Rand
goodness.
wandered off. You know,
Right.
Moraine thinks she knows which direction he wandered off, but she's like, I can still sense Perrin. We're gonna go get Perrin, so we're gonna get the Wolf family together with our wizard
Mhm.
family, and all will be well when that happens. So we'll see.
I was going to say, didn't feel any of the excitement of being back in Whitebridge, eh?
Oh, you mean like just the pretty glassy
Well, no, no,
bridge?
I meant just like the narrative device.
Oh,
Something crazy just happened here. Now a new group is coming in, and they're getting a different perspective on that.
hmm.
Did that play for you at all, or was it just like, meh? Just curious.
Yeah, I didn't like feel that much about it. I mean, maybe because I don't know. Do I care about these townspeople? Like, not that much, you
Mm,
know.
right, right.
I did. It's not the same situation, but it feels like an echo of what happened in Two Rivers, and also because I had called that they had like sacked Two Rivers, so I was like kind of anticipating when Rand wandered up back
Sure,
into
sure,
town that it would be sacked. But I did care a lot more about that because I'm like I know these people, I have a reason to care about
sure.
them. Where these are just random weirdos who
Yeah,
live by a
I didn't
pretty
mean so
bridge.
much. Yeah, I didn't mean so much about caring about them, but just getting to see the same place from a different
But
perspective.
why?
Do you like that in
But if I
stories?
don't care about the place, you could show it to me in 800 different perspectives, and it doesn't really
Interesting.
do anything for me.
No, yeah, what you say, your words make sense. I just feel differently. Like
You just
when
want
you
to
say
see
that
it.
sentence, when you say that sentence, I'm like, yeah, no, that sounds perfectly logical. And I'm like, and I loved every moment. Show me the divided wall. They don't
The same
understand.
divided wall.
Like
You were
I'm just,
excited about the same divided wall.
I absolutely
All
was.
right.
I absolutely was. But there is a mystery here of like what else happened, right? And I am starting to notice now that we're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
like these little mysteries that are popping up that I didn't really catch my attention because I don't think I do really care about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think I really cared about like why did some of the buildings burn? Why don't they want to talk about a fade?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like not really that interested. I'm just more interested in will this group figure out what happened and what happened to Tom, right? Like that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And where did the group go? Like what happened to Daman? Like I care about finding out what happened to those people. See, I don't care about the town
Right.
so
Right.
much
Right.
as like what that town can give me about the other
Hmm.
groups
Okay.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe if something was more surprising about that, I mean, I figured they would have hightailed it the heck out of there on the
Sure.
boat.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, I didn't think we'd get any resolution about whether Tom really bit the dust or not. You know, and everybody
Sure.
being kind of evasive about it felt like, I guess it felt similar to me about how everybody was being evasive about the heck they had seen a mirror draw, and the mirror draw had told them, you know, look out
Right.
for the dude with the white beard or the white mustaches,
Yeah, yeah,
and they
yeah.
were all being evasive about it there. I think it's just kind of that like climate of fear where they don't want to get singled out or
Mhm.
something, and that's how I sort of interpreted everybody not really wanting to talk about it.
Sure, sure. And I will say it does seem to just sort of be marking time. It's letting us know what the characters are experiencing because we kind of need that to logically know where they go
Right.
next. But it is true that not a lot happens,
Mm-hmm.
which is again why I think the chapter is real short. But to me, it's still fun just to get that little viewpoint, that little snippet of where they are. But no, cool. Just want to check on that. And then, yeah, we do get the Wolf family next, which I do think is surprising. I feel like as a reader, I'm definitely feeling, oh, really? We're back to them? I thought we would be at Rand's now.
Yeah, it set you up to expect
Because we
that.
had spent,
Yeah, because like the
yeah.
order,
Mhm.
but yeah, I'm not sure it's gonna be that like precise. Like the way after you do that
Mhm.
crazy turn in the middle and you have parent perspective in just part of a chapter, and now we're back to they all get their whole chapter. I kind of feel like he doesn't really care about being
For
super tight
sure,
with
for sure.
that.
No, and completely, I would agree. It was just because it felt like we did get both of those two Author chapters. This is almost like something in your favor. Since we did spend a decent amount of time with them, I feel like satiated with that, and it would be I would expect
Mm,
to get the other. So it is curious to me of this choice of putting it here next, and the distance we are getting from Rand, since Rand is basically the primary plot point, unless the purpose of this is to try to skew our eye, because we did have Belsman saying like, if
right.
you are the one. So it does seem to be looking to play up that what we've talked about of like which one is the one. But
Mhm.
it almost feels impossible because we spent so long with Rand in the beginning. It's like, well, you wouldn't make Perrin the one now, would
Mm.
you? So it was just it was an interesting choice to me. It was all.
Yeah, I don't think Perrin's gonna be the one. He's just gonna be king of the wolf people and be like the super wolf boy. Is my
Oh,
prediction.
there we go.
Why throwing predictions
Well,
out? We gotta go back over and
well,
like cross out all my wrong
we
predictions.
we got to write these down. I know,
We
right?
need a
What do we do?
scorecard for my
We
predictions because
really
I
do.
think I'm below par now at this point.
Well, as it is for them in the story, I think us going through this book is a learning experience, and we're figuring out the ways that'll be good for us to do in the future. But we should start keeping track now of this. So I will jot
All
down
right,
King of Wolf
all
People.
right, kick
But
'em.
wait, we're not going to finish this. We're not going to finish the series. Wait, we can't find out. I guess I could tell you if you're right at
Yeah,
the
that's true. At
end.
the end of
Either
this
way,
book, maybe.
it'll be fun.
All right, everybody. Well, we will see you for two more chapters next week. And yeah, take care.
Catch you then.